On behalf of Val and myself and the panelists who are here, I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. We're going to break the program into sections and try to keep it moving quickly. As Michael said, there will be on your tables paper and pen to which you can write down questions, and penmanship will be graded, so please make them legible if you want to have them responded to. We're going to start off with Mindy Lyle and Art Impastato. Panelists will introduce themselves. You probably know them, but it's a lot easier for them to do it than for us. And with that, Ms. Lyles.
Excuse me one second. We have on your tables these flyers that have been done by the city that sort of give you landmark past and present, which is really an excellent perspective on landmark over the years. As we get started, I wanted to make a special shout out to Mr. Bulmash. As many of you are aware, the Carpenter Shelter is in temporary residence at the Macy's space as we build our brand new facility at 930 North Henry Street next to the McDonald's. We've been at that location for over 20 years, and we have now a venture with AHDC, our partner, or the folks who did the Potomac Yard fire station with affordable workforce housing above it, and that's been a model, and we are partnered with them to build a brand new 60-bed operating center for our Carpenters Clinic, our community case management and education and employment programs, along with 97 affordable workforce housing apartments above. 10 of those units are going to be permanent supportive housing for our residents. The shelter needed temporary quarters so we could get out of that facility and we could begin the construction. We searched for almost a year and a half. Carrie Donnelly headed our committee, and finally we got the idea to approach Landmark or Howard Hughes to see if we could possibly make a viable solution in the Macy's. So we had Mark come down to the shelter, see what we're all about. He did a lot of due diligence to find out that we weren't fly-by-night squatters. And he did his homework. He took us out to Macy's. We went through and we said, hey, this would really fit. He said to me, Val, I grew up in Flint, Michigan, and I grew up with the philosophy as I got into business that corporations need to give back to the communities in which they operate. That was my philosophy that I developed, and I looked at him and I thought to myself, boy, I think we might have a deal here. And he worked his head off to get the powers that be at Landmark. He's very, very senior there, but he had to convince the CEO and the chairman that this was appropriate and we weren't going to be there forever. So we very much appreciate what we did. We moved in last spring. We started working with them in 2017. We moved in last spring just as Wonder Woman was being filmed, and it was sort of at the height of it with helicopters and cars and everything, but we got through that. We pay no rent, just operating expenses. And because of this generous philanthropic gesture that Mark did at last year's Business Philanthropy Summit, Volunteer Alexandria gave him and Howard Hughes Corporation a very special acknowledgement for their tremendous corporate give back. Our construction is commencing, and we're hopeful to be out of there by 2025. 2020. We're due out in the middle of 2020. So we have a special shout out to you, Mark, for the role you've played in helping us create an American model for ending homelessness. With that, we'll begin with Mindy.
Okay, thanks, Val. I'm Mindy Lyle. I am currently chairing the Landmark Van Dorn Small Area Plan Advisory Group. I also sit on Planning Commission, and I'm a resident of Cameron Station. I have been for 18 years. So I've been involved in Landmark since about 2005, when the Cameron Station Civic Association started petitioning City Council to fund studies for both Landmark Van Dorn and the Eisenhower West areas. One question that I'm asked quite a bit in Alexandria is, what is taking so long? And so I want to answer that up front so that we can sort of move on to what's actually happening right now and how quickly we've actually moved forward in this process. Most large development deals are decades in the work. National Harbor was somewhere between 30 and 40 years. The Alexandria waterfront redevelopment started in 1972 to refresh memories and is still not totally redeveloped. Capitol Crossing, which is under construction right now, was actually bought as air rights space in 1984, and the list goes on. So for the community to have started working towards something good happening at Landmark Mall in 2005, we're really now only 13 years into the process. We did one iteration of the small area plan that was approved in 2008, and at that point, there were multiple owners of the site, two of which went bankrupt or had financial difficulties which affected their ability to move forward. So the process right now has been a series of 4 meetings, and in those 4 meetings, we really have focused on what the community wants to see that is in sync with what the developers can do there. And part of that has been, what's come out in our process is that the community wants an active 24/7 environment that presents a lot of opportunities for live, work, play space. And this is a term you hear often, but in this iteration of the plan, which will actually come to Planning Commission on March 5th, I think you'll see that we really truly have a live, work, play space while taking into account some of the configurations of the site that present issues such as topography, transportation, pedestrian and bicycle access. Those have all been considered in this iteration. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Art pick up where I left off.
Hi, I'm Art Impastato. I'm the chairman of the West End Coalition. I'm also the acting president of the Cameron Station Civic Association. I serve on the advisory group with Mindy on Landmark. And basically, I want to talk about public participation because I think many of the people here have participated in the various iterations of Landmark Mall. And a lot of those ideas are being carried forward even in this plan. I think most of us wanted to see a mixed-use community, an urban center that we could go to, something vibrant like the Mosaic District. And I think it's very important for people like myself who live in the West End that we have that kind of an urban center. The other thing which is important for people to know, and I think Karl probably can speak to this more definitively than I, but Landmark Mall not being redeveloped is basically, I think, about $2 million a year in revenue that the city doesn't get. So this is something that we really, really do need, and I think it will also spur the type of development that we really want to see in the West End. Public participation throughout the process, I think, has been exceptionally good. I think the city has followed some of the good things that they developed in the Eisenhower West plan, for which it got an award. And so I'm very pleased that in terms of where things are now. I'm encouraged that we are moving. I think an important aspect to keep in mind is that Howard Hughes has put in charge one of its most senior people on this project in Mark. And companies don't do that unless they really have a strong interest in the project and it's right at the top of the pinnacle. So I think with that, I'll pass it over to Mark.
I'd really like to, first of all, thank the city and all their support the staff, but in particular the administration, Mayor Silverberg, for all of her support of us, as well as Councilwoman Del Pepper, and the rest of the city council. They've put up with us for a while. We had one iteration of doing this when it was imagined as a smaller project, but actually, to our good fortune, it's actually become a bigger project, which I think will allow us to be even more influential in how this project comes together. I want to talk a little bit about Howard Hughes and our vision and how we develop. We're a little different than your typical development company. First of all, we think in terms of building communities. For those of you who don't know, we are the spinoff from General Growth. Back in 2010, when they came out of bankruptcy, they spun off about 35 assets across 18 different states. We were non-core assets for them, thankfully. It really was a mall development company and operator. And the new company, the Howard Hughes Company, is very much of a mixed use and master plan community development company. But we don't just look at the physical settings of what we do. We look at how we can build communities. We don't just create buildings, but we look at the spaces and we try to inspire and aim to forge an emotional connection with our properties within their communities. And we have a real dedication to responsible placemaking based on a thoughtful consideration of the variety of offerings and services to contribute into making these communities succeed, and succeed in a way that's customized for each community's unique circumstances. Here at Landmark, we plan to build a vibrant, open-air, mixed-use community with retail, residential, and entertainment components. There may be some other uses as well. We're looking at a very interesting group of users, to be quite honest. I can't divulge much, though. Anyway, at the end of the day, we want to create this very dynamic urban village on the west end of Alexandria that really becomes the central meeting place for that area. We want to be the there. And it's an important part of our legacy and what we do, and we think that it informs how we go about planning our projects and executing them. Let me give you a little bit of history here. This is part of the original Landmark Van Dorn corridor plan that was done and approved in 2009. I have to give it to the GGP people for at least having the vision to participate in this. Again, they were a mall development company. At that time, they had already acquired the Rouse Company. They already owned a number of assets that we now have inherited. So there were a lot of smart people in that organization, but a lot of it was about their focus, which really was mall-based. They weren't really at their core a mixed-use development company. But we wanted to give you some scale, some sense of similar types of projects. It's already been mentioned, the Mosaic District. By the way, in yellow is the Landmark site overlaid on what is the Mosaic District. Similarly, for the Carlisle District in Alexandria, an overlay just for a sense of scale. And in 2009, the vision for the Landmark site was to build an attractive mixed-use urban center with distinctive architecture, transit, and community spaces that serves regional neighborhood needs and provides walkable streets and access with connections to the surrounding neighborhoods. And I think a lot of those core elements still remain. We're still pursuing this. We are in the process right now of amending this plan to provide even more flexibility so that we as developers can meet the needs of the Amazons of the world or other users that come through. I mean, let me tell you, when you talk to a user and they ask, well, how soon could you get us open? And you tell them, I don't know, 5 to 7 years, it's a real buzzkill for them, right? So we need to go through this process. We need to have the flexibility to execute on these fabulous visions that can make this a sustainable project as well. Anyway, here are just ideas that were done early on. These are some of the design boards that we're looking at. Again, heavy emphasis on walkability, public amenities. Again, give people the reason to come to your place. We live in a very competitive world out there. And if you don't have this really great place that people want to go to, they're not going to come. Let me give you a little bit of our history at Landmark. In 2010, this is what we inherited. It's this mid-third of the site. It was about 18 acres of a 51-acre site. This yellow area is what the mall owner actually owned here. In 2013, a number of things happened. We came back with a plan to redevelop our portion of that site. What you see there was actually approved, and we actually went all the way through and got a DSUP for it. And quite frankly, thankfully it didn't go through, because it was a department store-based or anchored project in a world where department stores are having less and less relevance. In 2013, we were lucky enough to have the ability to buy Lord & Taylor out of its leasehold interest. That's a key thing. Again, one of the problems here that inhibited development for so long was these projects are put together with something that's called a reciprocal easement agreement. That's an agreement that tells the developer and the department stores, this is what we're going to do, this is how you're going to do it, and if you want to change it, you need everybody's approval. In other words, any one of them could veto an idea to make a significant change at the project. It's a nightmare when you want to make big changes here. I know from a lot of brain damage and scars over the years having done that. In 2015, we actually modified our approvals to gain a little additional flex space. That DSUP is actually expired because it was no longer relevant. In 2017, after 3 years of negotiating with department stores to get approvals for what we had gotten approved with the city, you know, this project, Macy's basically finally capitulated. They sold us their site, which was a big deal. In June of 18, we were able to accommodate Carpenter's Shelter in the Macy's space because we knew it was going to sit fallow. And why not, you know, be a good corporate citizen, a good neighbor in the community, and accommodate a need that we could uniquely fill, and we were happy to do it. The timing right now is great for the site. We have the chance because we're working with Seritage, who, by the way, Sears created an entity. It's a publicly traded real estate investment trust called Seritage to own some of their best stores around the country. It was about 270 stores that they ultimately were transferred over to the Seritage. Seritage owns this site. The deal was done sometime in, I think it was 16 or 17. So all of a sudden we had a new entity to deal with, right? It turns out that was a good thing. We're working with Seritage right now in cooperating and replanning the site and getting the entitlements. And it's really an opportunity to create that flexible plan that can react to the shifts in the marketplace. And by the way, we can also put that REA ultimately out of existence to have that flexibility. Who are we at Howard Hughes and why does it matter? We're one of the few companies out in the country nationally who doesn't just focus on one asset class. We focus on multifamily, mixed use, hospitality, office, retail, master plan communities. For those of you who understand what master plan communities are, we own Columbia up in Maryland. We own the Woodlands in the Houston area, as well as Bridgelands, another major community. By the way, these are huge places. Columbia was about 14,000 acres. The Woodlands is about 28,000 acres. We also own Summerlin out on the western side of Las Vegas. It's about 22,500 acres. These are master plan communities where we own the land, and our business model is to sell the land strategically to home builders and then take the money that we get from that and redevelop the cores of these places to make them fully operating communities. I mean, the Woodlands has over 100,000 residents and over 100,000 jobs. Think about it. The Woodlands is about 1.5 times the size of Manhattan in size. It's huge. Anyway, it's with that strategic view of real estate that we also look at developing large master plan mixed-use projects, which are significantly smaller in size, but live by many of the same principles. We're all driven about creating these wonderful, these absolutely great communities, and think about it in a very holistic manner as such. Let me start off with a few of them, such as Columbia, which some of you may have heard of, up in Maryland between DC and Baltimore. These are drawings from our Meriwether district. We basically are trying to create a downtown in Columbia in addition to the mall. And we have the ability to develop about 4.3 million square feet of office buildings, about 5,500 new multifamily residential units, a new very large hotel, as well as an additional 1.3 million square feet of retail. I say this because these are the things that we do for a living. This is our bread and butter. This is why hopefully you will have some faith that we'll ultimately get this done, because we have done it. We have in our bones, this project has a lot of history. It was over 40 years in the making. Similarly, Ward Village, which is a project, again, bought by Rouse, this is about 60 urban acres in Honolulu, about a block off of the ocean. And again, we have the rights to do over 2 million square feet of commercial space, but more importantly, over 4,000 residential units. Most of these are ownership oriented, and it has a range from very high end of luxury to affordable housing in this project. It actually was named a couple of years ago as the best master plan community in the United States because of all the planning that we've gone into. And to Mindy's point, these things take a long time, and we recently were asked by the city to consider replanning parts of it so that we could accommodate a historic trail that comes through, that used to come through this neck of the woods, if you will, in Honolulu. It also will accommodate ultimately a light rail system that Honolulu is putting in, and will, again, transportation, a key piece of this in coming in. But we understand that these things evolve over time, and we've planned with it, and we had the flexibility to do it. Some of you may know South Street Seaport. We've totally reimagined this place. Even though it's only about 400,000 square feet, we've totally rethought this project. Among other things, on the roof, a new venue, a concert venue, where spring and summer we have started, we're about to embark on our second season in this really fabulous venue where you can see the Brooklyn Bridge is right here. 2,500 of your closest friends can watch concerts of varying artists here. But it's something that we thought was a great opportunity, a great part of the community, especially in the southeastern part of Manhattan where there really wasn't much to do, and we're supporting what's going on. We also happen to, we put in an iPic theater, which is probably the grandest motion picture theater in the area, in all of Manhattan, as well as ESPN's studios are now there, which is actually, it has gotten bigger than even ESPN thought. They're adding more and more shows because they're finding that they can bring celebrities to Manhattan a lot easier than they can Bristol, Connecticut. This is Woodlands, Texas. It's just north of Houston, we added in a very short period of time a new urban core to this project. We added about 2.3 million square feet, including space that we've leased to Exxon and others. Have added about 1,400 new residential units. There's a new Whole Foods anchored shopping center there. Here is a shot of the original downtown of the Woodlands, where it's actually a river running through it that ties this place. You can walk along a river and connect to the shopping center, as well as a lot of office and residential here. Monarch City is another project that's actually in my group. This is in Allen, Texas, of all places, 260-acre site where we're imagining 9 to 10 million square feet. About 5 to 6 of it is office. We don't think in terms of office parks, right? Most developers in Dallas used to think in terms of office parks. We were great at building office parks. Well, that's changed over time, and things are evolving. And what we've realized is, as millennials are getting married and having children and moving out to the suburbs, they still want these urban amenities, and that's exactly what we're creating with this great park. It's all about urban walkability, and it's unique in the Dallas area. Finally, Summerlin, I mentioned before, we had created a downtown retail district in a place that didn't have it, had no real retail at all. Don't want to spend much time on it, but we tried to, again, create a place that people could come and shop, or they could just come and be and eat or whatever it is. We've now started doing office here as well as multifamily. Anyway, I want to have Karl come up and talk about the process, and then we'll be happy to entertain questions.
Thanks very much, Mark. My name is Karl Moritz. I'm the planning director for the city of Alexandria, and I'm very proud to work for this great city, and also very pleased to be here with you. The Landmark project has a special place in my heart. I joined the city 10 years ago, August of 2008. My first community meeting here was a Landmark Van Dorn community meeting. I met Mindy that night. And it was actually it was the reason that I came here, was to work on this plan. So not only is it something that's close to my heart, but I think I really understand the importance that the community places on the redevelopment of this site. Not just the urgency that we all feel about it, we just can't wait for it to happen, but also that it's so important to us, and that there's fundamental aspects of the plan in the future that are important to the community here. Mark and Mindy and Art have talked about many of those, connecting the site to the adjacent community, having a thriving retail, entertainment, restaurant core, having the kinds of open spaces, central plazas, central parks, where when the community says there's a celebration happening, we all know we're going to be going to that central plaza to hang out and talk to each other, hear a speech or a concert or something like that. But also architecture and buildings that we're going to be proud of. Part of the reason I think that people were interested and willing to support some taller buildings here was to really see some great architecture, something that is symbolic of the West End, an identity that really reflects the unique nature of the West End of Alexandria. So when we were doing the update to the plan, really we were very careful and through the public process to make sure that we were not disturbing those core principles that were so important in 2007, 2008, 2009 when the plan was approved, that those remain constant. But that in order to further the goal that everybody has, which is to also see this happen, that we really needed to see where can we be flexible. What are things that we don't need to regulate so closely, really in recognition of how things work these days, that 15 years ago, we might be able to have a plan that's very specific about literally 150,000 square feet of this and 200,000 square feet of that, and have some expectation that we would get exactly that. But today, things are changing enough that we need to see where we can be flexible. And so that was the principle of doing this relatively abbreviated but intensive planning effort. And we're calling it Step 1, because it's checking in and making sure that we have a small area plan that is as flexible as it can be, but still contains those core principles that are important to the community and important to the property owner. But we are pledged to move as expeditiously as possible through the next steps. The next step would be a rezoning. This is sort of where the regulatory process confirms what the master plan says, and we put into law giving Mark and his colleagues the legal right to do what it is that we've asked for in the small area plan. And then the next step is what we call a development special use permit, which is when Mark and his colleagues will come in with a specific proposal for a specific building or set of buildings, and we'll be evaluating the height and the architecture and the land uses and all of those things against the principles that we put in the small area plan. We are expecting to be able to go take the rezoning, which we call Coordinated Development District, this year before the council's summer break, and then as soon as Mark is ready to be bringing those development special use permits forward to the Planning Commission and City Council and to the community for review, discussion, and then presumably approval. Once those projects, the development special use permits, are approved, Mark and his team will begin developing construction documents. And when those are ready for review and approval, he can begin pulling building permits. We have certainly our goal is we have a number of number one priorities in the city, but there's no number one priority that's more a number one priority than making sure that the mall stays on track. And so our staff is pledged to continue to make that happen. So let's see if I have any more slides. I don't remember. Yes, I do. So we had a four-stage community process for this. We wanted to make sure there was plenty of time to for people to kind of absorb, remind everybody where we were, what's already been done, and make sure there was enough time for people to kind of absorb what the current situation is, get their questions answered, have them make their comments, express their opinions, give us a chance to absorb that and get back to them. So we had not quite a day-long workshop on Saturday, January 26th, where a lot of that got sort of hashed out. So we have one more community meeting scheduled for later this week to go back to the community and say, this is what we heard and this is what we plan, before we go to the Planning Commission and City Council with an updated plan for their consideration. And of course, that's a public hearing as well, and folks are welcome to come and testify there. So that's kind of what we anticipate as the next steps, and I think maybe we're ready to get some questions.
Thank you, Karl. Good question out of the blocks is, why should we believe any of this will really happen? Will actually happen. We have a wonderful. You've got the key players sitting right here on this stage. The key members from the community and the Planning Commission, to the developer, and to the Karl Moritz, the planning staff. We have a wonderful planning professional staff, and what we've tried to do here is lay out the plan, and I would say that I believe them. Mark?
I wasn't there in 2009, so I don't know what kind of conversations GGP was having behind the scenes with users. But what I can say right now is that we have been having a lot of conversations with a variety of users behind the scenes. And the universal reception has been very good. I can't get into, I'm a publicly traded company, so I can't talk about names before I have deals in place. But we've been focusing on the big users here, and the planning work that we're doing for our first phase is based on conversations with users. So while I wish I could show you more tonight, you're going to see it through the process, and I know it's going to be a slow reveal for some, but we're basing it on conversations with real users, and I think we have somewhat of a track record that we can carry this off. But again, there's a balancing act that has to be done between the, what you can earn with the rent-paying people and addressing a lot of the genuine needs of the city that we'd like to address here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, a couple of things that were mentioned before. One is we're not in a situation where you have to have three entities, one of which was going down the tubes, in agreement. So that's a huge plus in terms of seeing this happen. Number two, you've heard it right from Karl, this is a number one priority for the city. And number three, as I mentioned before, companies don't put their top executives on matters that they don't care about. So I think this is a very different situation than what we saw in the past, where colleagues in the West End that I have were literally saying, we'll be pushing up the daisies before we see anything in Landmark. But one word of caution is that even once all of this goes before the Planning Commission and City Council, this is a big project. So this is not going to happen, next year we're all going to be going to Landmark Mall in the Mosaic District. It doesn't happen that fast. But this will happen. I really am encouraged. I think this is a very different posture from what we saw and what we were involved with many years ago.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I was only going to observe one more thing that happened in 2008 that had a little bit of an impact on development, is a worldwide economic collapse, more or less, in 2008, which really stopped a lot of progress on a lot of different projects, not just Landmark Mall. But that recession was it delayed everything everywhere for a good 2 years. And so when you sort of add up all the things that were happening, plus the fact that through all of that, people were still trying to make something happen and still working toward get this ultimate goal. And so the fact that it's taken a while is, I guess, doesn't undermine the fact that people have been constantly working toward this objective all this time.
One thing that we've done this time to really ensure success for the developer is we have not been as prescriptive in the small area plan as we were in the initial plan. And in this landmark plan, we're giving the developer pretty broad latitude in terms of what uses encompass the entire site. In the plan prior to this, we were very prescriptive about the amount of office space, the amount of retail, the amount of housing. And what the collapse of the economy showed us, and the collapse of the real estate market, is that if we leave a plan a little more open, the chance of that plan succeeding increases. So that's what we've done with this one. And the community has been on board the entire way.
I just also need to compliment staff here. Everybody throughout the staff, the city manager, the mayors that I've been involved with, they all really want to make this happen, and it's more of a partnership here. There's no adversarial relationship. Everybody understands what the mission is, and I think we're very much aligned.
That's certainly obvious. The easy question, quick, how long will the Carpenter Shelter remain in Macy's? We hope to be out by late spring of 2020, middle of the year. we have to be out because our lease runs up, and we need to, with all the tax financing of the project, we have to have it completed. We have Admiral Mike Lydon here with us today, who's a board member of the shelter, who's in charge of the redevelopment program from the carpenter standpoint. Question here, what lessons have you learned from the Woodlands and Columbia that will help you as Landmark is redeveloped?
I think that what we've seen with the Woodlands and Columbia has been both communities have this diversity of uses and amenities, which makes them among the most desirable communities in the entire metro areas that they reside in. And we use those kinds of principles for this. I came out of the mall development business, but I've been doing mixed-use projects for maybe 20 years now. It's really important. When I talk to retail users, they want to know about residence and office and other uses. They want to be in those types of communities. They don't want to be in mall settings. What we're trying to create here is some place where if you're living in this community, you're probably going there at least once a week, and in many cases multiple times a week. In the old mall model, you would go there once a month to do your shopping. So we really want to be a center of activity on the West End, and I mean really an active activity center.
I think you've probably started to answer a large group of the questions that have come in. I'll break it into three distinct parts and kind of lump them all together rather than reading them individually. Issues on traffic, Van Dorn, King Street, Duke Street, the peripheral areas. Secondly, affordable housing, the impact the development's going to have, the pluses and the minuses that go with workforce housing, and schools as a related issue. And third, you started to touch on the stores and that would be there, the retail. Big box stores, CubeSmart, Inova Hospital. Can you address these issues?
Let me start with traffic. With the community, we've really been studying with staff this issue, and I don't know what the final answer is going to be here, but what I can say is it's going to be different than what it is right now. Duke Street really functions as kind of a suburban highway. I mean, fast traffic, a ton of traffic going through there. It gets very congested at peak periods of time, which is a real concern for the community. We get that. I think that ultimately the road evolves into something that resembles Washington Street, where there's the same level of traffic, but it's not going as fast. And it becomes more conducive to people walking and riding their bikes and so forth, so it won't be just automobile related. And we're working very closely with the city on that.
Maybe I'll jump in because one of the major transportation or vehicular features of the site today is that overpass that comes from the median of Duke Street and then goes into the. And there's two problems with that at least two problems with the overpass besides its appearance is that it is a barrier, a visual barrier to the site. So going up Duke Street, it kind of walls off the site, and it almost it acts as a barrier. The second is that it's really designed as a speed ramp, and it moves vehicles well, but it doesn't help pedestrians or others get in and out of the site. So there's been strong interest from everyone in getting rid of that structure, and what that would allow is a wider median in the center of Duke Street, which would allow us to keep the same number of lanes of travel going in each direction, but have both wider sidewalks on either side, which is better for pedestrians, but also a refuge in the middle of Duke Street, so folks who are crossing one side to the other have a chance of making it. Some of those intersections are really the least safe in the city, And we take very seriously the goal of making it not just more pleasant, but safer for people wanting to cross back and forth. So back to you.
I'm glad you mentioned that about that flyover, and if you've ever been out there and really experienced it, it's a miserable experience to walk against the retaining walls and so forth. I mean, we joke internally that the only thing that the planner forgot was to put a moat in it to make it, even less accessible by pedestrians. So, it's something that we've heard loud and clear from the community. They want to make it more accessible, not just with cars. We are talking about actually adding more streets into the property, but also taking away those barriers that keep people from going in there. You asked, let's see, about affordable housing. Look, this is something that I take very seriously. We do as a team. We understand it. There's actually a great podcast by Business Insider that was done. It initially was done to talk about Carpenter's Shelter, but it also got into the decline of retail and the lack of affordable housing in Alexandria, and it really makes the case and really changed, helped me understand it even more before I had Helen work on me, right? We take it very seriously. We're looking at a variety of ways of providing affordable housing here. There are a number of different incentives to look at it. Over time, we want to be able to provide some on-site affordable housing in the low, the 30 and 40 and 50%, up to 60% or so. Housing with some of the incentives. We may not, that may be a piece that we don't do because we're not experts at affordable housing, but there are also programs such as bonus densities and so forth where we could incorporate it in residential buildings that we do, for instance. And we're looking at a whole bunch of very creative solutions to meeting these issues. Some of it is co-locating. I think the Potomac Yards model of putting affordable housing above a fire station is brilliant, right? It accomplishes a few different really important things to the community, and we're studying that. And we're looking at ways that we can incorporate that into the project and be mindful of, again, we want to create this very vibrant, sustainable community. The irony of some of these really high-end communities around the country is that some people have so much money that these houses are temporary, right? So that at any given time, maybe 20% of them are occupied, right? That's not much fun. It doesn't do retail very good, right? So I think that when you mix up the incomes, you actually have a more vibrant residential community that supports the rest of the project. So, and anyone else want to opine on that, or?
I just want to say that, yeah, those issues were loud and clear at all the community meetings. The transportation issue, I think, having more access points is going to be a big thing. The bus rapid transit, I think, is also a big plus. That's also happening. But believe me, that in the West End, we are really concerned about traffic and transportation. But I think the ideas that I've seen at the meetings kind of address a lot of those concerns.
The last issue I think you asked me about was schools, right? Schools are definitely an issue, especially out on the West End where there's a lot of density and a lot of demand for schools. And I think the school system's been doing some very interesting things. We've toured the Ferdinand Day School, which is a converted office building, and I give the school system kudos for being very creative about doing that. It actually looks like it's a wonderful place to go to school. For us, I can't predict the future. I know in our early phases we don't have that much of housing to demand or kind of tax the school system, if you will. But over time, we think that may be a big component of the project, is a lot of residential. And then it becomes an issue of, can you create enough demand for a school and figure out how to pay for it by maybe incorporating it within another structure, right? Again, I think creativity is really important here. And this is going to be driven by, I think, the demand that we create on site. I mean, ultimately, and I don't have a total crystal ball on this, but you know, if we end up putting together a significant amount of residential, it probably makes sense to put a school there as an amenity for all the residents and to make it a pitch point for them. So the way we look at it is we want to be creative in trying to solve that project, but it probably at the end of the day gets driven by the demand that we would create for it. I mean, certainly we understand that we need to be part of the solution for whatever we generate from that site.
I think the flexibility that's built into the plan, again, this is very much like the Eisenhower West plan, where it's a conceptual plan, and I think that's really important because things have changed so rapidly in the last couple of years in terms of what makes sense financially, what people are actually doing, that you need that flexibility. We don't want to be in a position saying, well, block number 2 must be this. You need that flexibility, but at least have a plan which they brought together. And again, this is a plan that has developed over time, but the core values, as Karl said, have remained. And it's actually been enhanced.
Right. Just one to jump on your analogy of the Eisenhower West plan had in it something that said we would like to see, we have a need for a school site, we have demand for schools or other public facilities. So the fact that it was noted and described in the small area plan, then when a development project came through, a rezoning, in this case it was the Green Hill rezoning closer to South Pickett and Van Dorn, we were able to then work with them to identify a part of the parcel where we would get that school site that we wanted. So here at the small area plan stage, we're really just including that list of things that we are potentially looking for maybe a future public-private partnership or what have you.
And by the way, things change. You know, we talked about the need for flexibility. 20 years ago, this was one of the places along the 395 corridor to have office space, right? There were large office complexes here, and now today it's about 30% vacant. And a big reason for that is that new corporate users want to be within walking distance of metro stations and so forth. And so that we didn't really have that knowledge back in '09 when the small area plan was being envisioned, and there was a lot of office contemplated as part of that project, and it's one reason it never really happened, where you had the downturn, and then when users started evaluating it, they began to have this bias to be near metro stations. And even though I think that we're going to have a significant transportation center here, it's going to be bus oriented, it may not be enough to convert the corporate users, decision makers, into relocating here as opposed to somewhere near a metro station.
Speaking of bonus density, is there any thought to creating an arts district out here?
I'm sorry?
Bonus density with an arts district?
An arts district?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that you mentioned that idea has come up. And it's something that we consider in all of our projects. How do we address that? I mean, if you think about a community and all the component activities that go on, arts is certainly a big part of it. And we haven't figured that out. I mean, it's something that we should think about, and we need to understand more.
The city's done that with North Old Town plan, with both at the Crown Plaza that Carr Properties is developing with Metro Stage going in there, and then Carr's also got another project at 12-something North Royal that's going to have space for the Art League, 6,000 feet, which will allow them they get bonus density because of that.
It's interesting, in our plans in Allen, Texas, we had envisioned this Central Park place with an amphitheater out there. and I can't tell you how many arts groups have come to us, noticed that piece, right, and said, we'd like to be able to use that, right, multiple ones. And it's heartening that, you know, people can imagine them kind of that being the central part of their whole community, that they want to actively, you know, promote the arts there, and they see the power of that and the potential.
Val, we have not looked at that at an arts district the way they did in the Old Town North Small Area Plan. We've talked about the importance of the arts, and we've talked about the importance of having entertainment venues, but in terms of the arts district, as it compares to Old Town North and to the bonus density associated, that has not come forward in any of the community meetings that we've had.
One last follow-on question on that discussion. There were a number of questions about the retail tenants, who they might be,
Right.
big box stores, Inova Hospital. Can you comment on any of that?
In terms of the retail, I can say this. We've gotten some really strong interest from theaters, right, which, by the way, was mentioned at the community meeting. People really had this strong preference to bring in a great theater, and we're probably talking to 3 or 4 actively right now. Major supermarket, probably a major health club, a lot of restaurants. We really haven't gone beyond that in terms of understanding what the retail is. I've had interest from some big boxes, but I tend not to be real crazy about them. They, you know, we want to have this great street life, and big boxes kind of kill the chi, if you will, right? So my preference, actually, if something like that became part of a project, that maybe you could elevate it and use it as an anchor, not unlike what they did at Mosaic with Target. But I don't want this to be just another big box center. It really wants to be, and quite frankly, the planning on the first phase of this project is very heavy on retail, not on the order of magnitude of a mall, but it is the connective tissue that brings together all of these other uses and really creates some of the public spaces and a great backdrop for them.
You had mentioned working with the Sears Group earlier. Is Sears remaining in the site, or is that being negotiated right now?
I don't expect Sears. I don't expect Sears to be there ultimately. And by the way, our relationships with Seritage as opposed to Sears, the owner of the property as opposed to the operator right now.
And then a follow-on question regarding the ingress and egress. You had mentioned bus lanes. Is there a potential for the trolley to run up and down Duke Street or something of that nature, or is that just in the fantasy stage?
I don't think that we've really gotten in that level of detail, but
So the most specific plans are for the West End Transitway, which is currently in the advanced stages of planning, where the city has gotten tens of millions of dollars in funding already and is up for tens of millions of dollars of more funding, which would be a bus rapid transit line that goes down Beauregard and then Van Dorn, connecting to the Van Dorn metro station. And the idea is that it would run through the site, and there'd be a transit center within the middle of the site. Longer term is a bus rapid transit line that would go up Duke Street and also get off and connect at the transit center in the Landmark Mall sites, right at the heart of that, because we think that this sort of high capacity, frequent, rapid service, while not a metro, as Mark was pointed out, is a service that people could rely on, so they can use it for commutes, they can use it to get from their house to the retail center, et cetera, and it'll bring it them right into the heart of that, of the retail center. So there's greatly enhanced transit plant, absolutely.
And just one final question, is the name going to change?
You know, we're still studying that. And part of it is we're going through a process right now. We're interacting with the community. We're trying to understand what's important to them and what resonates with them. So I can't tell you yet, but we're thinking about it.
So it's not going to be Bulmash Mall.
No. That I can assure you it won't, no. It won't be about me. It'll be about the community.
Thank you very much. We're out of time here. I wanted to thank Ashley Labadie, who's in the back, who's Karl's deputy, who put together all these slides for us. And I want to say that we're going to pass these over to Donna, and she's going to put a link to them on our website so that you can have all of this material as a takeaway on this. And we want to, yeah, sorry.
One more thing. Please join us on the 27th, which is Wednesday at 7 p.m. We'll be at Patrick Henry Rec Center for the final meeting on the Landmark Small Area Plan. And then on March 5th, goes to Planning Commission, and 2 Saturdays later to City Council.
Thank you all for your participation here and all you're doing to make Landmark move forward.